Hello, this is Camter from Lost Forge Tabletop Gaming, and let us talk about RPGs. In particular, Dungeons & Dragons Hoard of the Dragon Queen, and the worst campaign I have ever participated in. For some backstory, this was a group that was put together by some coworkers that I worked with back in my video game days, and it was ran by my first QA manager. He was a really nice guy. He was really into tabletop RPGs and board games and stuff, and he was a really nice man. But I learned over time that he was a ruthless dungeon master, and he was kind of notorious about it. But I didn't find out until we sat down for the first campaign. So the party was set up, so it was my manager, who was the dungeon master, his wife, who was playing a monk, two of his good old friends who were playing a rogue and a warlock, I believe. He never really divulged what his class was. He was kind of the highlight of that group because he was always kind of mysterious, and we never really got to find out his backstory. But there was a little bit more to him. So I think he's a warlock because he always kind of smelled bad. Then there was our druid, who was my co-worker. She was playing a druid, and then we had a barbarian, gnome barbarian, because he was kind of always tinkering and working with tools and stuff like that, and that was like his main character quirk. And then finally myself, who was playing a sorcerer. Now, when I was invited to play and asked what I wanted to play, it's like, well, I'm comfortable with spellcasters and stuff. My boss said, well, the campaign I'm running is going to be a little bit different. Spells are going to be a little lighter in quantity. Are you willing to kind of just take one less spell slot? I'm like, yeah, that's fine. It's like I can work that in. And the character I kind of created was a pompous asshole of a wizard who thought that he was great. He was he was a sorcerer. I remember he was a sorcerer because I had the wild magic table. But he was a giant asshole, and he was kind of always cocky. And so I wanted to play him so the table would kind of have this annoyance source of kind of like pompiness to him. But in the end, he was always going to do what the party asked, but he was just always kind of like, well, I don't feel like helping out these people, blah, blah, blah. And that was kind of the plan for the character. In spoilers, it worked, but you'll see what happens here a little later on in the story. And what happened was, we were placed into a group traveling to Greenest in a merchant caravan, just as kind of like our place of origin. Now, if you've played Rise of the Dragon Queen, you know that the town of Greenest becomes attacked by blue dragons. And it is your job to kind of fight them off and deal with that problem. We started out in a caravan with 5 of us, and we were fully rested. We had our spell slots. We were starting level 1, and we were thrown into a battle pretty quickly with 7 kobolds and 3 cultists. Now, for a group of 5, that you think wouldn't be too bad, but these kobolds weren't taking the amount of damage. They were taking more damage than they should have per hit. I think they were taking, let me double check. Pineapple. They were taking about 8 to 9 damage when they should only be taking 5. So what I was doing was, I was inside of the caravan and I was using my crossbow for first couple of rounds, that I switched to my cantrips, and they were taking 5 to 6 damage and not dropping. And I was like, okay, that's, these must be like a little bit higher level kobolds and stuff. No, he just really wanted to kind of put the pressure on us. So we barely made it out of this first battle with our lives, and we had to blow a lot of... I blew, I think, like 1 spell slot trying to keep someone from dying. And so we finally completed that first challenge, and it was like, okay, that was kind of weird. We finished that up, but we were having a good time. We were having a fun time kind of just thinking on our feet and stuff. And we ended the first session entering the town of Greenest, where that town becomes under attack by more cultists, and it's this giant raid of, dragon cultists, kobolds, all this other stuff. And I think we ended the session with fighting 3 like lieutenants and story named characters in front of one of these gates. And my character got really cocky and doing what he's supposed to do. He's like, I'm going to go in there and I'm going to kick some ass. And I chromatic orbed one of the characters in the face and crit him and killed him straight up. That was the most effective my character ever was for the entirety of this series because of all the weird stipulations and the fact that we only ever rested twice throughout the entire series. So I was stuck with crossbows and cantrips for very, very long periods of time. And so that's where we ended the first session. And that kind of like made me think like, okay, that was fun. It was a little challenging, but you know, it's like I'm having a hard time. Every fight ends with me just dropping and the rest of the party getting to pretty much finish the fight. Like, this is pretty ridiculous. And that's kind of how it was for the entirety of the Greenest kind of invasion. It was large-scale fight with way more enemies and way tougher enemies than instructed in the book, followed by a bit of exposition, and then we would just kind of rinse and repeat. And it wasn't just me. We'd have people constantly like dropping at early levels until I think we hit level 3. And we were just kind of dealing with this on and off like combat. And I get it, that's kind of like the siege kind of mentality. You don't get time to rest and stuff, but there was no short rest. There was no time for us to really catch our breath, and there was no way to kind of prep. And so throughout the entire section of the dungeon, or I would say the campaign module, we were just getting our asses handed to us. And it was kind of like at the time, like I said, I thought this was a homebrew campaign. I didn't know this was actually a pre-made module. And so I was just kind of like, okay, so this is kind of the story he wants to build up. All right, we'll keep running with it. So after a while, we finally were able to leave the city and get outside to what is called Episode 2, the Graders Camp, where we go to their camp and kind of spy and learn more about what's going on with these kobolds and stuff. And at this point, you know, I've finally been able to rest for the first time, and I got my spell slots back, and I kind of rearranged my cantrips to be a little bit more combat effective, opposed to more... I like to have spells that are thematic to my character alongside being useful, so I will take kind of like Prestidigitation or a couple other kind of like silly role-playing-esque type of spells to go along with my combat tricks. I went full combat tricks at this point. And so we were leaving the city, and we got a new player at the table, my friend Sean, who began playing a orc bard who used a hammer and cowbell as his kind of like musical weapon. He was supposed to be very kind of clunky and silly. Our DM did not like bards as tradition and went out of his way to really kind of target him. And that made Sean really kind of not want to attend these sessions, along with the fact that we were also busy with work and we didn't have like time. Like, there was a lot of times where we had to work super late during that period of time, and he had to kind of stick around it and help out where he could, and he always kind of got shit for it. But, you know, I was able to kind of make these meetings as I was on a different project and stuff. And so this kind of brought a contention, because now we have this character who's getting targeted more than me, just getting his ass handed to him, and like only can make it to a couple of sessions. So that was the second kind of time where I was kind of feeling a little bit more kind of uncomfortable with how things were sitting. And while that was going on, my friend who was playing the druid and I were kind of talking about like, all right, this is a little weird. It's a little kind of strange that we're kind of getting these really hard encounters and stuff. And we were kind of talking about it, and she's like, well, I don't want to be rude. You know, we do work with them. And it's like, yeah, you know, it's like, what am I going to be doing at this time? Like, I'll still attend it. It's kind of nice to, you know, kiss ass to the bosses a little bit and this and that. And hopefully kind of like learn more about like what makes different encounters so interesting and stuff. So we continued to do our, you know, meetings for a while, and it kind of was this on and off period. And when we finally made it to the Raider camp, we really hit the largest kind of point of contention, where the camp was so deadly we had to find other ways to kind of go about it, but he kept wanting to force fighting encounters. I think at one point he made me roll a wild magic thing on his special. He created a special wild magic table because he found that the one in the book wasn't as exciting, which was fair. Like, I was totally down for that. But we kept rolling the magic table more often due to his kind of like magical restrictions and how he wanted this world to build. And he kept rolling camouflage. We don't know why it kept happening, but it kept rolling camouflage, so my character would just vanish and become like this stealth agent. And I used it in the rebel camp to kind of scout around and cause chaos for us to escape. And I think I made him mad because what I was doing was I was using my cantrips to catch tents on fire. And this is like the only remarkable part about this whole story without going too much into like point by point what happened in the rebel camp. So I was going around, I was lighting things on fire and causing all these problems, and just kind of having an excuse to kind of a distraction essentially while everybody else was trying to fight for their lives. Luckily it worked. We were able to get out, and by this point I think we were like 6 or 7 months in. We played once every 2 weeks, I believe, and we were all kind of the group. We all got along pretty well, but my character was very hated by the group because of how kind of like sarcastic and not useful I was because of how little I could do without my spells. So, and I don't think they were trying to be like very venomous or kind of anti-friendly with me, because, you know, the DM's wife, great person, very, very lovely. She was very fun to play with. My boss, he was kind of like very a stickler to rules and stuff, but it was nice to see kind of someone who's played D&D for so long and kind of getting into that mindset. He role-played his character very well. His character was very interesting as the gnome barbarian. And the other 2 friends of the DM that joined us, they were decent people, and I had a good time playing with them, but I think they just kind of didn't like how I played my characters, because I kind of became the joke character, not intentionally, but just because of how circumstances, and I rolled with it. And so it kind of took us to where the last part of the campaign took place before events happened. And so we made it to the Dragon Hatchery, which is chapter 3, which we got pretty far in consideration of things. And we were in this hatchery, and I think the big kind of contention point was there were a bunch of people that were alive, and they were being used to incubate dragons and kobolds. So they were being used to breed more kobolds for this army. And I, as a character, I was actually, you know, killing the people that were in pain and kind of giving them mercy. And I was just like, for every person we keep alive, that is more kobolds that are going to be on the field. Plus, these are people that are hurting and dying. It's like, I'm not going to let that happen. There's no way to save them. So I used my knowledge check, and I confirmed that, like, yeah, there's no way these people are going to live. You might as well, they're either going to die giving birth to these kobolds, or they're going to, or you can kill them now and get rid of that suffering. Like, either way, there's going to something happen. But if you do it this way, you're going to kind of have more of an impact. So that's what I did. I burned an entire room full of people suffering with these kobolds, and that kind of put me at odds with our warlock/priest friend. And at that point, him and I were kind of going back and forth on kind of ethics and stuff like that. And we entered a room where there was a desk, a giant hole, and some paperwork. And I decided to take a look at the paperwork and see if I could find any kind of like interesting clues and stuff. And we opened up, I remember it very clearly, it was a book of draconic poetry. And the DM hands me a paper, and as I was holding this paper, I had to sit there and read this poetry to everybody, and of course it was awful. And so I broke my will save after, I think, like 2 rounds of me reading this bad poetry, and everybody's like, oh, we gotta get rid of him. And so I broke it, and so what I did was I threw the book into the well, and I caught it on fire. I'm like, no one else needs to deal with this crap. This well was pretty deep. It was probably about like a 30-foot drop at a steep angle. And I was standing over there, and me and the warlock were kind of talking, and he pushes me in. He pushes me into the hole, thinking that I did something awful, and he broke my AC because I'm a wizard, and we fell in, not knowing to either of us that the hole was going to just instantly kill me. That was how my character ended its campaign. Not in any of the combat, not in any of the, role-playing events or any of like the bigger story moments. I was killed by a fellow player at the table. And I don't feel bad about the circumstances in which it happened. I don't know the intent of the people at the table. And as I'm telling the story, in the back of my head I was like, did they really want me away from this game? Did they no longer want me at this table? And I don't think that was true, because everybody that I worked with would come up like, how are you feeling about the player character and stuff? And I'm like, it was funny. It was a good way to die. Like, I haven't had a player character die like that before. And, I didn't take it as a hard feeling, because I wanted to play something that was a little bit more useful. So I talked to the DM, and we set up another character who was going to be a fighter tank, so our barbarian could be more damage related. And so this new character was like a very good tank, but his downside was he had a charisma of an 8, but a confidence of an 18. So that was the kind of character I went with on this one. And the last section of the campaign we played was a kind of tied over in the Baldur's Gate, and I don't know if that part is in this. Let me double check here. Yep, it looks like Baldur's Gate was a small section of the campaign. They picked up my character while traveling up into Baldur's Gate, and we were spending some time in there doing some additional role-playing stuff. And my character was supposed to just fail a lot of charisma checks and kind of be this clunky, kind of airheaded, kind of good-hearted character who was an innkeeper who became, a sellsword and kind of joined the party. And the problem was he kept criticking all of his charisma checks for the entirety of the campaign, except for one, which that's where the campaign left off. He was able to trick his way into the freak show of a local carnival and earn prize tickets to play free in the DM's kind of like carnival minigames. And I could tell that the DM wasn't happy about it, but everybody in the party was, because I found a way around like paying and doing all this stuff. And it worked. It was a clever way of doing it. And, I don't think he had like too much of a problem with it. But like our campaign kind of sessions ended, unfortunately, when there was a layoff at the game studio, and he was unfortunately one of the people that was let go due to restructuring. And we were invited back for one session where my warrior was arrested for lying to a guard, trying to get to the characters for kind of to regroup and continue the story. And my allies broke me out. So it ended with my character stealing guard armor and breaking out of jail, and that was kind of where it ended. And I'd never heard from him past that point, and neither did anybody else that really played with him. And I'm not sure if he did that because he wanted to distance himself from his previous coworkers, but it was, luckily, I didn't have to quit the campaign, and things kind of fell apart on its own, and I felt kind of bad, because he was definitely a very nice guy. He just ran a very rough D&D session for sure. And I feel like in the opposite spectrum of kind of like reading the table. He's from the older mindset of Dungeons & Dragons is brutal. Dungeons & Dragons will kill characters. Like, it's not going to be forgiving. But I'm at the mindset of like, I will kill a character if it definitely suits the story. I'll kill a character if the player is ready to kind of face that. I'm never excited about having a player kill. I'm never excited about, doing things that are making the players not have fun. And there was a lot of times where it felt like a drudge going through these combat situations and stuff, especially as a spellcaster who never got to rest. And being a sorcerer, like, I didn't even have the benefit of being able to learn new spells. I had to just learn what was in the book and just kind of run with it. And I will admit, I rarely cheat in games. There were a couple of times where I said I had more spell slots than I actually did, just so I could help out the party a bit more and get these encounters finished. And I had to kind of use my fork lightning or my thaumaturgy or, my chromatic orbs and stuff to just get the job done. And it sucked because the dice rolls also were never in my favor, and that was just a side effect of having a really, just built badly character, but that was how we wanted to do it. And yeah, the lesson of this story was like, there's only so much abuse a player can take in a campaign before he gets pushed down a hole and the other players kill him. But that's kind of how I always see this adventure. And I have the book in my hand right now, and I look at it, and I don't think about running it again, but I love kind of looking at it every once in a blue moon and remembering the campaign that I ran with this. And if I ever have the ability to run this as a player again, definitely I hope it's a better experience. I would definitely love to see how book 1 concludes. I might get the full entire story sometime just as like a novelty, but it's definitely one of those adventures where it's memorable. It was probably one of the longest campaigns I played as a player, but it wasn't always like, it was always kind of a mixed bag. And if you ever are in that situation where you feel like, you know, things are too hard and stuff, you should be able to talk to your DM and be like, hey, you know, this is feeling a little rough. But when he's also your boss at work, it's a little bit more difficult. So yeah, definitely a weird situation, a weird story to be in. And now I know that if I'm ever in that room again, to never pick up any books, because it has cursed draconic poetry, and that will lead to your character being kicked down a hole. Let me know what you think, if this kind of story brings back any memories of D&D campaigns you played, or if you remember playing this story and there's things that didn't happen that I talked about. Please let me know in the comments section below. I'm definitely interested to hear on other people's perspectives on the Hoard of the Dragon Queen and the rest of the series. And if you have any comments, suggestions on how to make this series better, please let me know in the comments below. Comments help the YouTube algorithm think that this show should be seen by more people, and that is a fun full circle of YouTube being weird. Anyways, this has been Campter from Lost Forge Tabletop Gaming, and I will see you next time. Take care.